Hallucinogenic mushrooms are a natural psychedelic that causes hallucinations. About 30 minutes after consumption, colors become brighter. Patterns begin to creep across the walls. Time stretches like an elastic band, and your sense of identity begins to melt. Your brain is thrown into a state of euphoria, leaving you questioning what is real and what is not. But what happens when you consume too much? On a quiet Saturday afternoon, a 21-year-old Hispanic man was returning home from work and consumed an unspecified amount of mushrooms. Soon after consuming them, he began to have a bad trip and started acting erratically upon arriving home. His stepfather and brother intervened and restrained him, trying to calm him down, but he broke free and broke a glass vase in the process. In his frenzied state, he then began rubbing himself against the shards of glass on the floor, severely injuring his arms and legs. His brother and stepfather managed to intervene to stop him from hurting himself further with the broken glass, and he was seated at a desk. But shockingly, in a horrific act, he picked up a number 2 pencil that was on the table, positioned it vertically, and repeatedly banged his head against the sharpened pencil. Subscribe to the channel and leave a like, because what comes next will show you just how far the human mind can go when it completely loses control of reality. Have you ever imagined what it would be like if, suddenly, the world around you began to distort? Colors take on a life of their own, time slows down, and your mind detaches from reality as if it were just a lucid dream. That's exactly what some describe when experiencing psychedelic substances, an intense trip that seems to expand consciousness, but can, in seconds, transform it into an uncontrollable nightmare. What seems liberating at first can quickly become a prison within one's own mind. Science explains that these experiences alter specific regions of the brain responsible for perception, time, and identity. In other words, it's as if you turn off the realistic mode of your mind and open the door to a distorted version of everything that exists. The curious thing is that the same substance doesn't always produce the same effect. For some, it's a spiritual journey. For others, a total mental collapse. The line between ecstasy and panic is thinner than most people imagine, and that's where the stories become alarming. Because when the mind loses control, the body follows suit without resistance, without logic, without return. Some believe this is just part of the experience. Others discovered the real price too late. But hold on, because what follows will show you the exact moment when a psychedelic trip stops being a curiosity and turns into chaos. Why would anyone risk everything for a sensation that promises to rewrite reality? Many start with pure curiosity, a controlled dose of hallucinogenic mushrooms, expecting only vibrant colors and profound insights. It's like hacking the brain to see the world from a new angle where stress disappears and creativity explodes. But what seems harmless soon reveals hidden layers that no one warns about. The secret lies in the chemistry. These substances activate receptors in the brain that amplify serotonin, turning simple patterns into hypnotic visions and time into something elastic. Few people know, but studies show that the environment and initial mindset can transform a light session into something unpredictably detailed that separates euphoria from total disorientation. For the 21-year-old we are about to meet, it was just another ordinary Saturday, a casual experiment after work, and then everything changes in minutes. What began as a quest for mental expansion becomes a labyrinth with no way out, where control slips from your hands. But that was just the prelude. Wait until you see how panic takes over and chaos truly ensues. What if a simple Saturday afternoon turned into the worst mistake of your life? A 21-year-old Hispanic man arrives home from work, eager for an experience that promised clarity, but which quickly turns into torment. The effects hit hard, the world contorts, his mind screams in panic, and he begins to act unpredictably, as if reality were a threat. What was euphoria dissolves into a bad trip that no one could have foreseen. His stepfather and brother try to intervene, holding him down to calm him, but he breaks free with inexplicable force, shattering a glass vase on the floor. In a frenzy, he throws himself against the sharp shards, cutting his arms and legs in an act of blind despair. They stop him in time, sitting him on a desk, but the horror doesn't end there. He picks up an ordinary pencil, sticks it in the floor, and in a shocking fit, smashes his head against the point repeatedly. When he raises his face, his eyes reveal the price: pierced, destroyed by the illusion that consumed him. The family's panic explodes in desperate emergency calls, but the damage has already been done. The body resists, but the mind is lost forever. These are not just isolated stories. They show how the brain, betrayed by chemistry, can become its own enemy. And the scariest part? This was not a rare accident. Wait for the next wave of chaos that came from a lake full of dangers. Do you feel invincible? As if the whole world is yours to conquer until that illusion leads you straight to the abyss. In Orlando, Florida, a man under the influence of methamphetamine transforms an ordinary afternoon into a nightmare of uncontrolled rage. The drug explodes in the nervous system, releasing dopamine in an avalanche that makes the heart race and the mind focus like a laser. What begins as pure energy soon turns into an internal war that no one wins. Witnesses call the police after seeing him trembling on a racetrack, screaming for a son who isn't there, lost in hallucinations of absolute power. Officers arrive and find him submerged in an alligator-infested lake, refusing a life jacket as if death were a joke. He emerges covered in severe injuries, brandishing garden shears as a weapon, and charges at police cars in a state of animalistic rage. They electrocute him repeatedly, but nothing stops him until he storms into an officer's car, reaching for a weapon, forcing a lethal response that ends the chaos. Methamphetamine not only distorts reality, but cooks the body from the inside, burning organs and regulating temperature like an out-of-control oven. But if you think madness always comes with violence, the next case will show you an even more disturbing silence. What if the world's most common substance could turn you into a monster without warning? Cannabis, smoked by millions daily, relaxes muscles, amplifies music, and awakens an insatiable appetite. But what happens when the effect turns into pure delirium? There's no known lethal overdose. You'd need thousands of joints to get close. Still, the real risk lies in the mind, where a casual session can trigger psychosis in the least expected person. In the spring of 2018, in California, a woman who had recently befriended a man from the dog park followed him to his apartment for a nice, quiet smoke. They lit up together, laughing at first. But something quickly changed. She jumped from her chair, ran to the kitchen, and grabbed 3 sharp knives. What was a light conversation turned into a rampage where she relentlessly attacked him, inflicting blows in a way that covered his body in marks from head to toe, almost erasing his entire face. The police arrive and find her still in a rage, having even injured her own dog and cut herself more than 40 times. Continuing the act as if she were in another world, they electrocute her 4 times without success, until an officer breaks her arm with a baton to drop the knife. She survives. But he doesn't. In court, they prove marijuana-induced psychosis, and she goes free with only 2 years of probation and community service, leaving his family rightfully furious. But if that seems unfair, the next case will make you question the boundaries of madness even more. Imagine believing the world has ended and that you're the final warrior between God and the devil, lonely to wake up from a nightmare you created yourself. 2 friends, a 26-year-old martial arts fighter and his training partner, decide to experiment with an excessive dose of mushrooms in their apartment, expecting only an intense session of insights. At first, everything flows normally, but soon the hallucination engulfs them. They become convinced of an epic battle for the salvation of humanity, transforming the room into a spiritual battlefield. What started as a game becomes a deadly fight with no turning back. Psychedelic euphoria distorts everything. The brain, overloaded with psilocybin, merges reality with delirium, causing them to see demons in every shadow and angels in every blow. The fighter, naked and in a trance, rips out his friend's heart while he's still alive, tearing open his chest in an act of purification that leaves him without a face, tongue, or vital organs. A third friend enters the kitchen and finds the surreal scene: the mutilated body on the sofa, and the aggressor cooking the remains on the stove as if it were a sacred ritual. The autopsy confirms the horror. The victim, felt every second until the end. The fighter is arrested and sentenced to 47 years in prison, without mitigating circumstances due to drug influence. Unlike previous cases where psychosis was excused, this exposes the hypocrisy of the system. For some, delirium is an excuse. For others, pure crime. But all these stories converge on a dark point. The real poison is not in the substance, but in what it awakens in the fragile mind. And now, let's connect the dots and see what truly unites these collapses. What if the greatest enemy wasn't the drug itself, but what it reveals about the fragility of our minds? All these stories, the young man with the pencil, the man in the lake, the woman with the knives, the fighter in the kitchen chair, the same common thread. It's not the chemical toxicity that kills, but the psychological collapse that follows. Substances like psilocybin or methamphetamine rarely cause a fatal overdose on their own. You would need absurd amounts for that to happen. The real danger arises when the brain goes into panic, delirium, or rage, transforming illusions into irreversible actions. Science confirms these experiences hijack the reward system, distort the perception of time and identity, and can trigger psychosis in vulnerable minds. Depending on factors such as environment, dose, and predisposition, what seems like a gateway to expanded consciousness becomes a trap where the body follows. The orders of a short-circuited mind, jumping out of windows, attacking loved ones, or self-destructing without logic. It's a brutal reminder that true human strength lies not in physical endurance, but in the mental stability we all underestimate. Ultimately, these tragedies aren't about specific substances, but about the risk of toying with the balance of the psyche. They force us to question, is fleeting euphoria worth it if the price could be the total loss of oneself? And if you think that's the end of the conversation, wait for the conclusion that will tie everything together and leave you thinking for days. Have you ever stopped to think that? Deep down, all these stories scream the same lesson. The human mind is too dangerous a territory to explore without a map. From psychedelic delusions that melt reality to outbursts of rage that burn the body from the inside, the pattern is clear. It's not the chemical poison that destroys, but the chaos it unleashes in the psyche. Scientific studies reinforce this. Factors such as genetics, environment, and even the mood of the day can transform a harmless experience into an irreversible collapse, proving that no one is immune. What begins as curiosity ends in tragedy because we underestimate the power of the betrayed brain. These cases are not rare exceptions. They expose the cracks in what we believe to be total control over ourselves. Methamphetamine accelerates the heart to its limit. Cannabis can silently blur the line between friend and threat, and mushrooms transform the self into a hostile stranger. It's a grim warning in a world obsessed with quick highs. The real risk is losing what makes us human, the ability to discern the real from the illusory dot. So, the next time you hear about safe trips or light experiences, remember, the price can be higher than any euphoria promises. If this made you reflect on the limits of the mind, subscribe to the channel for more stories that challenge what you think you know. Leave a like if something here shocked you, and comment on which case affected you the most, because understanding these abysses can be what saves us from falling into them. Stay in peace, and until next time.